Welcome to the latest episode of the ERC Talks. My name is Sonia. I work as a communication officer in the European Research Council, and I will be your host for today. But before we dive into the topic, which I will keep it a bit of a suspense, let me tell you what just happened to me this morning. I arrived to the office, I open my laptop, and then it goes blank. Nothing works anymore, not responsive. So what goes on in my mind next? Did I save the projects that I was working on? No. They were on the desktop, which means lost. So some of you might actually guess the topic, which is data loss. And I think it's going to be very interesting for everyone because it happened to all of us at some point in our lives. We are here with Dr. Nanna Bonde Thylstrup, who kindly joined us directly from Denmark, from the University of Copenhagen. And it's a pleasure to have her and to discuss more about this topic. Welcome.
Thank you so much, and thank you so much for inviting me. It's very exciting to be here. So I am the PI of an ERC-funded research project called Data Loss, the Politics of Disappearance, Destruction, and Dispossession in Digital Societies. And the project is a multi-year project that's intended to examine the politics of data loss as it happens in digital societies.
And what drew you to study data loss? And why do you think it's important for us to know about it?
Well, paradoxically, it was actually a visit to the National Archive, which is one of the biggest collections of data in Denmark, that drew me to the question around data loss. So I was interviewing them about how they handle the massive influx of data that digital administrations are currently producing. And at one point in the interview, the archivist told me that I had to remember that datafication not only produces big data accumulations, but also big data losses.
Indeed.
So what they were inferring was that we have very little knowledge of the data that goes lost, but we know, of course, as your episode this morning, that we lose data all the time. So this project, for me, both sparked a basic research interest. How can we study it? How can we conceptualize data loss? And then also on a more fundamental policy level and theoretical level, what does it mean to study data loss in digital societies, especially in Europe?
And how does data loss affect people and then at another level, communities? Are certain groups more at risk of being impacted by this?
So as you mentioned earlier with your anecdote, data loss happens to all of us. And that's, of course, one of the key tenets of this research project is actually that data loss is an inherent component, not a failure of datafication. But when we look at the political patterns of data loss, including processes of erasure and deletion, we also know that they disproportionately affect certain communities. That can happen through warfare, of course, but it can also happen through everyday practices such as content moderation. So an important part of this project is to be attentive not only to the material components of data loss, but also the patterns of data loss.
Indeed. You just mentioned things like disappearance and dispossession when it comes to data. Can you explain more about this?
So our research project is fundamentally a conceptual one. And to me, that means that I want to examine how we also not only experience these processes of dispossession and disappearance that we intuitively know, but what does it actually also mean on a material level? So for me, disappearance is a way for me to examine, for instance, the discrepancy between the material arrangements of information and how they appear to us through the interface. Say that you delete an email and you believe that now this email is gone. But of course, on the material level, we also know that many components of the email will still be in the system. So that's one example of us experiencing that a piece of information has disappeared for our eyes, so a visual manifestation, but might still remain there. And that has a multitude of implications. Another example I might mention for dispossession is something that we're currently looking into, which is communities that experience data dispossession. So here we're interested in the particularities around digital and data economies, because data economies aren't scarcity in the same way that, say, land property is. You can replicate data infinitely. But there are other ways in which data economies still produce dispossession, and that's one of the areas that we'll be looking into.
That's great, and it's super useful. Okay, so let's then get to the next question, which is about data rules and regulations. Like, is there a set of rules at European level, or does it apply to each member state when it comes to better protect people of the risk of data loss?
So for me, the European Union and being based in Europe provides a particularly advantageous vantage point to study the politics around data loss, both as something that can be a right that can be protected and manifested and practiced, but also as a political pattern of erasure that European countries will have to take into account, and of course also on a global scale. That means, for instance, examples around the use of and the take-up of ephemeral messaging systems in bureaucracies. So how do we now govern that? So when you ask about, are there particularities around the rules and regulations? Yes, and that's part of our research subject as well. I can mention one other example, for instance, the Danish archive law, which we're looking particularly into. How do archival institutions live up to the archive law, and how do they face and navigate the challenges, the particular challenges that datafication incurs on them as administrations become increasingly digital?
Thank you. The next question is about the world that we're living today, which is in a super fast way. It's all about AI. It's all about the digital age. Where do you see data loss in this context?
So I think it's particularly this condition that we live in now that led me to research and want to research the politics around data loss. So if I talk to people who work in computer science, and I do that often, and I treasure our interdisciplinary collaborations, they are often most concerned with how do we gain more data, how do we accumulate more data, and that's often many of the advances that we know in machine learning and algorithmic societies are dependent on the accumulation of data. At the same time, I also know that many of these technologies and scientific fields are greatly concerned with questions around how to get rid of data, how to clean data, how to transfer and migrate data from one area to the other. So I think that even in these economies of datafication, the questions around data loss are still particularly inherent, but they're just not given that much attention because we tend to focus on the accumulation. And that's what I try to offer a balance to.
It's very important. Yep. Okay, and this brings us to the final question, which is a bit more different. It's about your ERC grant. Can you tell us shortly about your experience of receiving a grant, and if you have some tips for potential other applicants?
Thank you for that question. Well, when I learned that I had received the ERC grant, I was in San Francisco conducting field work in the Internet Archive, and it was 4 a.m. in the morning, and I woke my partner up and I told him, and we were absolutely ecstatic because it meant that I got to conduct research in what fascinates me and matters most to me at the moment. That said, if I give a tip, and I often do that to people who ask me, I also tell them that to me, to write the ERC application, I actually decided to write it on the basis of what I wanted to do. So even if I didn't get the grant, it would have given me the opportunity to sit down and consider and manifest also to myself what the red threads of my research interests were. And just writing the application actually gave me opportunity to do so. So in that sense, when people apply, even if they don't get it, they will not have wasted time. It will have been valuable time given to them. That said, if we take away and disregard my own research passion, I think it's also very important to acknowledge that applying for an ERC requires a massive amount of work hours, not only from the applicant, him or her or themselves, but also from the institution that are behind them. So I think that it's very important that we talk about the work, how we apply, how we ensure institutional support for these application processes. Because for institutions to get an ERC project, is an uncomparable resource, but they also have to be willing to provide the support in the application process itself.
Thank you, Nanna. This has been so inspiring. This brings us to the end of the interview. Thank you very much for being here and for sharing your insights into this research. I think we can all say that it's been very interesting and that we're looking forward to see what next for the project. Please keep us posted with news and results. And we're looking forward to see where it goes and how data can shape Europe's future.
Thank you so much. And thank you for the invitation. And I hope that you get your data that you lost this morning back.
Thank you so much. And we hope you liked the discussion. If you have any feedback, any comments, or any ideas, please go to the comment section of this video and let us know. And stay tuned for the next episode.